Hello, Lord Uncle Heaton here. I think moving forward, once a month or so, we're going to start doing rebroadcasts of favorite episodes from the back catalog of the Political Orphanage. In part because I have discovered that when new people find the show, they don't, as I had hoped, take a week of vacation, drop everything, turn off their phone, and just listen to the entirety of the show going back to its origins in 2018. So I'm going to pick some of the top episodes and once a month or so rebroadcast them. Today's episode is a great interview, one of my all-time favorite, maybe my favorite interview that I've ever done with Daryl Davis, who has an incredible story. Also, probably the least amount of talking I've ever done on the show. I don't know what that says, that my top interview really didn't involve me very much, but there you go. Daryl Davis is an amazing guy, and I think his story is ever more pertinent for the time period that we find ourselves living in and the hubbub that we find ourselves working through. I think you'll enjoy it, and we'll have a normal episode later on in the week as per usual. Thanks, and enjoy. Hello and welcome to The Political Orphanage. Are you more interested in coming up with solutions to problems than discovering new reasons to hate your political opponents? Are you one of those weirdos who still has friends you disagree with? If so, welcome home. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton. I am joined today by Mr. Daryl Davis, who I am so excited to speak with. Daryl Davis is a very multi-talented individual. He's a musician, a pianist, a singer. I think blues. Is that right, Daryl?
Whatever they pay me to play. My degree is in jazz, but I play blues, rock and roll, country, boogie woogie, big band swing, R&B, whatever.
I kind of do that with comedy. When people reach out to me and they're like, "Can you make this one thing funny?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I could make your think tank literature about water rights amusing. Yeah, I'll do that." But your professional background is in music. But I think what I find fascinating, what we'll talk about today, is that you attend KKK rallies and have brought, I think, over a couple hundred individuals out of the Klan. I think, Daryl, you are doing amazing things, like truly wonderful things. And I am just excited to talk to you about what you do and how to fix racism and all of that.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to share, whatever I can from my own personal experiences, which I think will work for other people as well.
I hope so. Well, and so I can see you. You're, of course, very handsome. We're both wearing brightly colored dress shirts, by the way, for anybody listening.
All right.
We look like, I don't look like I could be in your band. I'm not that cool, but I do look like maybe I could hand out tickets for your band or something. Like we kind of we have similar dress style. But for anybody listening, Daryl is black, just so you know. So the stakes are high when Daryl goes to Klan rallies. It's not like I could, in theory, blend in if I wanted to. Daryl is going to stand out a little bit. So, Daryl, walk me through this. How did you get to the point where you're meeting people in the KKK and going to Klan rallies? How did that happen?
Well, it started, my fascination with racism started a long time ago. But understand my background. My parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service. Mm-hmm. So I grew up as an American embassy brat, traveling all over the world, living in different countries, 2 years apiece. Then at the end of the 2 years, coming back home for a little while and then being reassigned to another country. I'm age 62 now, and all this traveling started at the age of 3 in 1961. Today, I'm a professional musician, and now I play all over the world. So when you combine my travels as a child, added to my travels as an adult, I have been in a total of 57 different countries on 6 continents. So I've literally been exposed to a multitude of cultures, religions, ethnicities, etc. And all of that, starting at an early age, has helped shape my perspectives and now, who I am today. Mm-hmm. So overseas, when I was a kid, going to elementary school and things like that, my classes were filled with other kids from Nigeria, Japan, France, Italy, Germany, Australia, Russia, you name it. If they had an embassy there, all the embassy kids went to the same school. And so my classroom literally looked like a United Nations of little kids, because that's exactly what it was. But at the same time that I was being what we would call today multicultural, because that term did not exist back then, when I would come home back here to the States after my dad's assignment was over, I would be either in an all-black school or a black and white school, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. And we did not have the amount of diversity in the classroom back then that I had overseas or that we have today. It was just black kids or black and white kids. And so I was already prepared for diversity. Unfortunately, many of my peers were not. And on the flip side, I was not prepared for racism, because I'd been around people from all over the world. I got along with everybody.
That makes sense. If you're a little kid, I mean, first of all, I don't think little kids really have a racist bent to them. I think it's taught. I don't think it's intrinsic.
Exactly.
And so if you're a little kid, you're way more concerned about whether your friend has a trampoline than how much melanin is in his skin, right? And so if you're growing up in that environment where you've got, you're making friends based on very different things than that, and you come back to the United States, it would be very illogical. It would be a weird incongruity to be like, wait, what? Like, that's why? Wait, people don't like each other because of skin color?
You're spot on. And I found that out the hard way when I was marching with an all-white Cub Scout troop. And everybody was cheering us in this parade of other organizations as well. The streets were lined with nothing but white people. I was the only black scout participating. And as we got down the parade route, a small group of people mixed into the crowd that were standing together. I remember there being a couple kids and a couple of adults who were throwing bottles and rocks and soda pop cans at me. And my first inclination was, oh, those people over there on the sidewalk, they don't like the scouts. That's how naive I was. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until my troop leaders came rushing over and protected me with their own bodies. And they didn't tell me why this was happening, even though I was asking. They were just kind of rushing me along to get me out of the danger. And when I got home, my parents had asked me, how did I fall down and get all scraped up? Because, they did not witness that. They were not at the march, at the parade. And I told them I didn't fall down. I told them what had happened. And for the first time in my life, this is 1968, I was age 10, they sat me down and explained to me what racism was. Believe it or not, at the age of 10 in 1968, I did not know what they were talking about. I had never heard this word, racism. That's how, that was not in my world, as you pointed out. I was around people from all over the world, and we all got along. Even though some of us, did not speak the same language, we got along. We played together. We worked together. We had slumber parties together. Racism was nowhere in our world. So, I did not believe my parents when my parents were telling me this is why it happened. My 10-year-old brain could not wrap itself around that idea.
Sure.
That someone who had never seen me or spoken to me or knew anything about me would want to hurt me for no other reason than the color of my skin. It simply made no sense. And I could not find any logic to it. So I formed a question in my mind at that time, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? So I've been looking for the answer to that question, for now 52 years. And who better to ask than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has a 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them and who don't believe as they believe. So, go right to the horse's mouth. Well, what happened was, like I told you, I majored in music, and I graduated college in 1980 with my degree in music and began, playing immediately, which is what I do today. And I joined a country band some years back. Country music had made a resurgence in this country. And so if you wanted to work, you played country. Mm-hmm. So I was the only black guy in the band, and normally the only black guy wherever we played. And we played in a bar that was known as an all-white bar. Not that there were any signs saying blacks couldn't come in. They simply did not feel welcome there. And when you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, it's not a good combination, trust me. So anyway, here I was in this bar with this country band. Now, they had played there before. They were pretty established in the area. My first time there. So when we came off the bandstand after the first set, a guy came up and put his arm around my shoulder as I was walking across the dance floor to go sit down. And he told me, how much he enjoyed our music. And I thanked him, shook his hand. And then he says to me, this is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. And I was not offended, but I was surprised that this guy who appeared to be a lot older than me did not know the black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's style of piano playing. And I proceeded to tell him, he got that style from black blues and boogie woogie piano players. That's where that rock and roll rockabilly style came from. Mm-hmm. Well, he didn't believe that either. Jerry Lee had invented that. And I told the guy, I said, look, man, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a good friend of mine. And he's told me himself. The guy didn't believe that either. But he was fascinated enough with me that he wanted me to come back to his table with him and have a drink. So I had a cranberry juice. He paid the waitress. And he took his glass and he clinked my glass and cheered me. And he says, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. Now I'm like really curious, how can this be? Because in my lifetime at that point, I had sat down with thousands, literally thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. So how is it that this guy who's been around longer than I have had never sat down with a black guy before? I'm just totally baffled. And I innocently asked him, I said, why? I had to ask him like 2 or 3 times. And his buddy elbowed him and said, tell him. And so finally the guy says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I burst out laughing uncontrollably.
Your response was to laugh?
My response was to laugh. Absolutely. Because I have every book written on the Ku Klux Klan. Uh-huh. When I formed that question in my mind, I started buying everything I could find on racism, on black supremacy, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, anti-Semitism, the neo-Nazis over here, trying to find the answer to that question. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? And like you said, I know it's a learned behavior. So where did it come from? Where's it going? How can it be addressed? Well, my books all talked about it, but they didn't answer the question as to why. And so I knew a lot about the Klan. And, those members just don't come up to a black guy and hug him and want to buy him a drink. And
I don't know that I've ever met any KKK members, but I feel like they wouldn't be super huggy around black people. I mean, that's just sort of
they definitely would not be huggy around black people. Yeah. And, you may not think you've met some, but you may have. Because just because they're not wearing their robe and hood don't mean that they're not members or share that ideology. So there are people in suits and ties, uniforms with badges and guns, Hawaiian shirts and Bermuda shorts, a judge's black robe, that all feel that way. So anyway, he said that, and I burst out laughing because I thought he was joking me, And he went inside his pocket, produced his wallet, and flipped through there and handed me his Klan membership card. Now, I know a lot about the Klan. I looked at this and, I recognized the Ku Klux Klan insignia, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center of the cross. And this thing was for real. So I stopped laughing. It was no longer funny.
Sure.
And I gave it back to him. But we talked about the Klan and a lot of other things. And long story short, I quit that band. I would see the guy every time we would play there, every 6 weeks, because he gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him whenever this band was to return.
Wait. So you meet this guy, he buys you a drink, he admits that he's a Klan member, but he asks you to contact him because he does like your music, and you do, like my music. And you invite him.
Yeah, and he became a staunch fan. And not only that, right? He wanted me to call him because he wanted to bring his friends, meaning his, Klanswomen and Klansmen friends, to come see the black guy that plays like Jerry Lee. Now, I'm not sure that he called me a black guy to his friends, but, that's what he wanted to bring to see me. I was a novelty. He wanted to share me. And so I'd call him every 6 weeks and say, hey, man, we're going to be down at the Silver Dollar Lounge. Come on out. And he would come, and he'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen. And they'd come and watch me. They'd gather around near the bandstand and watch me play the piano. They'd get out on the dance floor and dance to our music. And then on the break, of course, I'd go by his table to say hello. And some of the Klan people would hang there because they were interested in meeting me. They were curious. And others would see me coming and get up and hurry off to some other part of the room So it was like, look but do not touch. They don't want anything to do with me other than observe me. So they were out of there, and that was fine. But anyway, so that went on until the end of the year. And then I quit that band and went back to playing rock and roll and blues and whatever else was going on.
Daryl, all things aside, all things involving racism aside, you must be a hell of a musician if you're so good as a black guy you can get KKK members to come watch you on a regular basis. You must be exceedingly talented to have that much draw.
Listen, everybody likes music. The Klan likes music. You like music. I like music. Neo-Nazis like music. So music is a uniter for sure.
True. Yeah.
And and you play something that resonates with the individual. They're happy. Now I can tell you something right now. 100%. Had I walked into that bar, not as a musician, I might have had to fight my way out. I'm serious.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, long story short, I left that band, and then. Much later, it dawned on me, Daryl, the answer to your question that's been plaguing you since age 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? It fell right into your lap. Who better to ask than a Klansman, right? So I need to get back in contact with that guy. All my books written on the Klan were written by white authors, except for 2 by black authors, but they talked about the Klan. Each author had escaped a lynching, one in the 1930s and one in the 1940s, but not from the perspective of sitting down face to face and interviewing their would-be lynchers.
Right.
That's what I wanted to do. So I decided, I'm going to contact that guy and get him to fix me up with the Klan leader for the state of Maryland, which is where I live now. I'm from Chicago originally, but I live in Maryland. And then I'll travel up north, down south, Midwest, West, and interview different Klan leaders and groups and stuff, members, and write a book and be the first black author to write a book on the Ku Klux Klan from sitting down interviewing these people. So I did a meetup with that guy again and persuaded him to give me the Klan leader's name and phone number. Not name, I knew his name, his phone number and address. And he did not want to do it. He was fearful. In fact, he had left the Klan by the time I met up with him again. And but he was fearful to take a black man to this Klan leader for his safety and for mine. And I had to persuade him to give me this information, which he did on the condition that I not tell the Klan leader where I got his personal information. I said, okay, fine. So I had my secretary call the guy, and she's white. And I only mention that because it plays into my story. Not that I care whether I have a white or black secretary or anything like that. Anyway, the guy had told me, Daryl, the man's name was Roger Kelly, the Klan leader. He told me, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly. He will kill you. And that was all the more reason why I want to get to know this guy. Why would somebody want to kill me? I need to know this. And hopefully not get killed in the process of finding out, right? But anyway, I figured I had the phone number, but if I called him, he might detect in my voice that I'm black and say, I'm not talking to you, click. And then my whole process, would have ended before it ever got started of wanting to interview Klan people. So I had her call, knowing that he would know automatically, by her voice that she's white. And he would not automatically assume that a white woman is working for a black man, especially a black man who's writing a book on the Ku Klux Klan, because, they don't exist. And so I told her specifically, do not tell Mr. Kelly that I'm black. Now, if he asks, don't lie to him, but don't allude to it. So she said, okay. And the reason being because if he knew I was black, he might turn down the project. But also, if he knew that I was black and accepted my invitation to get together and be interviewed, in the interim, he might prepare different answers, anticipating questions from a black interviewer than a white interviewer. And I wanted, spontaneous, candid responses.
You didn't want a polished answer that he's going to put in to make it sound good, based on that. You want to get a raw understanding of how he's thinking. That makes sense.
Precisely. So she called. He didn't ask what color I was, and we agreed to, he agreed to do the interview. So we set it up for the motel above the Silver Dollar Lounge. And Mary and I got a room there several hours earlier than the scheduled time. And I sent her down the hall with some money to get soda pop out of the machine and fill up the ice bucket with ice and get the soda cold, because I had no idea what this man was going to do when he arrived at my room and saw me. Would he attack me? Would he say, I'm not going to talk to you, and turn around and walk away? Or would he come in and do the interview as he said he would do over the phone to Mary? But in any event, I want to have cold beverages there to be hospitable and offer him, something to drink. So we did that. And we waited, and right on time at 5:15 in the afternoon, which was the time, there was a knock on the door, and Mary gets up and runs around the corner and opens the door. And meanwhile, I'm seated at this table in the far corner of the room where you could not see me from the doorway. And I had a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly and a chair on the other side for myself. And I had a bag beside my chair, a black duffel bag that contained the Bible, because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization, and they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. So, I want to be able to pull out my Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate. And I also had a cassette recorder, which I set in the middle of the table, all in hopes that he would allow me to record our interview.
Sure.
And I had some blank cassettes in the bag. So anyway, the guy knocks on the door. Mary runs around the corner, opens the door. In walks this bodyguard, Klan bodyguard, who's dressed in military camouflage with that same Ku Klux Klan insignia patch on his chest. And on this side, the initials KKK, and embroidered on his cap, it said Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And he had a semi-automatic handgun in a holster on his hip. So he comes in. Mr. Kelly is walking right behind him in a dark blue suit and tie. And the bodyguard turned the corner and saw me in the room and just froze right in place suddenly. And Mr. Kelly did not realize this guy had froze in front of him and bumped into his back and knocked him forward. So now they both are stumbling around trying to get their balance. And I'm just sitting at the table, watching this comedy kind of thing. And they're looking all around the room like, something's not right here. And I'm looking right into their faces, and I could read their faces. Their faces were plainly saying to me, did the desk clerk give us the wrong room number? Did we misunderstand something? Or is this an ambush, And so I stood up and I displayed my hands to show I had nothing in my hands. Uh-huh. And I walked forward. I extended my right hand. I said, hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis. And he shook my hand, and the bodyguard shook my hand. So far, so good. I said, come on in, guys. Have a seat, please.
I got to say, that sounds like the best possible introduction for an armed KKK member and a black musician is genial handshaking. So far, so good. Yeah. So far, so good.
So I invited, come on in. Mr. Kelly sat down, and the bodyguard stood at attention to his right, very erect, And right before I could sit down in my chair just opposite him, Mr. Kelly says, Mr. Davis, do you have any form of identification? And I said, sure. And I produced my driver's license. And he says, oh, you live on such and such street in Silver Spring. Now, that had me a little concerned.
Yeah, that sounds like I would interpret that as, just so you know, we now know where you live.
Right. And so I wanted to give him the same interpretation. And so I said, yes, Mr. Kelly, that is where I live. And you live at, and I recited his house number and his street. And so I was leveling the playing field.
Yeah.
And, I didn't say that, but that was my implication by reciting it.
Right.
And so he smiled, he nodded his head as though he understood. And I did not find out that day, but many months later, that I was being presumptuous. I had no reason to fear this man knowing my address. One of his members lived right down the road from my house. He would have to travel this street right here in front of my house to get to that guy's neighborhood, which is only 2 neighborhoods over. And I had no idea. And so, but today that same member is in a federal prison and for committing a hate crime. He's there for a while. So anyway, I had no way of knowing that particular day.
Although you could be forgiven, Daryl, for having some amount of wariness in approaching a KKK leader. Like I get why you would think maybe that was dangerous. That is not like, I don't think you need to feel bad about misunderstanding this man's intentions with that question.
Yeah. Well, so we got on with this conversation, and he told me within moments that Black people are prone to crime, and we're basically criminals. I said, well, now how do you figure that? Well, Mr. Davis, all you have to do is look at the prison system. There are more Blacks in prison than white people. Well, yes, that is a half truth. There are indeed more Blacks in prison than white people, but the other side of it is he's not considering the inequity of the judicial system, or the fact that some of those Black people, whether they committed the crime or not, did not have top legal representation or adequate legal representation. And so that's where they are. They took a plea even to something, they didn't even do. And so that's where they are. And but the fact that he sees them in there, that fits his narrative right. of Blacks being criminals, right? And one's perspective is one's reality, so he doesn't look any further.
Well, if you've got an existent worldview, it takes very little evidence to reconfirm your worldview to you. One or two anecdotal bits, and you're like, "Yep, exactly. I'm right." It takes a tremendous amount of contrary evidence to get someone to overturn their worldview.
Yes. So he also said that Blacks are inherently lazy, that we don't want to work. We prefer to scam the government welfare system. And also, now get this, he said a book had just recently come out at the time called The Bell Curve.
Charles Murray.
Yeah, Dr. Charles Murray, which was just a crock of bull spit. But anyway, and again, he never read the book.
Right.
But just the fact that he understood that the book implied that Black people's intelligence was inferior to white people's, that was all he needed to hear. And that, again, enforced his belief already, his narrative.
One of my friends read a book by a doctor who said white people are smarter, or at least that's my friend's interpretation of said book, and this confirms everything I need to know. Yeah. Exactly,
So he said that Black people were born with a smaller brain than white people, and therefore that small brain did not have enough capacity for a high IQ, like white people. So in other words, the larger the brain, the higher the IQ. So
that's just straight up like 19th century phrenology.
Yeah. And so anyway, and I'm asking him, well, what's the proof of that? And he says, all I had to do was check the SAT scores that Black students score consistently lower than white kids, which is true. But again, he's not taking into the consideration of the lack of quality education in Black schools, or they didn't have access to all the equal stuff that white kids did in terms of education. And so I said to him, I let him get all that stuff out. Now, when somebody is sitting 2 feet in front of you across a little small table in a motel room, and they're saying all this stuff to you, is it offensive? Yes, absolutely it is offensive. Was I offended by it? Absolutely not. And that's the difference between me and perhaps a lot of other people. Because a lot of people would find that offensive, and then they would react to it. They'd push back, or they accuse the other person of being ignorant or criminal or whatever, or depending upon how high their emotions run, they might reach across the table and smack the other person for saying those things. And that's what they were expecting, because they say a lot of offensive things. Some of those things they believe, other things they're just trying to push your buttons, and they're used to confrontation.
Right.
All right. I was not offended in the least, because this man doesn't even know me. He just met me 5-10 minutes ago. All he sees is the color of my skin, and he's making these assertions about me. Why should I be offended by a lie? Why should I be offended by an untruth? Why should I be offended by somebody who doesn't know me? Now, if my mother or my father was telling me these things, they brought me into this world. So, they might have a little more credibility to tell me that I'm not that smart, or that I'm lazy, or, Daryl, I think you're behaving like a criminal, or whatever. I might put more creed into that than some stranger who just sees my skin color. So my self-esteem is enough for me to not be offended by this nonsense. So I let the guy know after he got it all out that I don't have a criminal record. I've never been on welfare, and I've never measured my brain size, but that I'm sure it's the same as anybody else's. And furthermore, the people who score the highest in this country on the SATs are not white people. They're the Asian students. And their brain size is no bigger than anybody else's either. Uh-huh. It's the culture in their country of their study ethic, their work ethic. They focus more on what they need to do than we do. We goof off a lot or whatever, meaning we black and white people or Americans over here compared to how they study over there in China. And they bring that with them when they come here and go to our schools. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I let him know this. Now, because I did not push back, which is what he's used to when he says these offensive things, he was thrown off his game.
Yep.
But this black person is listening to me. He's not even reacting. And so, because, when they come into the room and they see you, their wall goes up because you are the enemy. But now I'm sitting there listening, allowing him to say these things. The wall is going down. And so now he's more apt to reciprocate and allow me to say some things because I allowed him to have his platform. And so when I present all that stuff to him, I'm planting a seed. And he has to think about that. So, when he goes home, he has to think about that experience, that he had with me. And I'll get to that in a second.
Well, I'll add to that briefly, Daryl, that they've done some studies where, say with like homophobia, it's difficult to ever like argue somebody into taking a different position. Just arguing is just inherently difficult. But they've done studies where if they let somebody just explain themselves and explain their position, and then they ask like why do you think gays are sinful or whatever the thing is, and then they allow them to actually spell out the whole thing, and they feel heard, and that they've been able to communicate, then the rancor they have drops. The needle kind of edges over, that there's something about that allowing the explanatory process to happen that lets people feel a little bit less pugilistic.
Well, also what it is that's on track there. Rather than attack somebody and say, no, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. You're the one who's a criminal. You're the one who's on welfare, whatever. You are attacking somebody, so you're causing that wall to go up because nobody wants to be attacked. So rather than go into an offense position, stay with the defense and talk about yourself. And that way, you're not attacking them, so their wall is down, and they're hearing what you're saying. Well, Mr. Kelly, I've never been a criminal. I don't have any record. I've always worked. I've never been on welfare. I don't have any food stamps. I completed college. I have a college degree. So my scores were good enough to get into a university and graduate, knowing that he never went, past high school. So what you do is you edify yourself, and that way you're not attacking him. And that's something that he has to see. So then when he goes home and thinks about, geez, you know what? I just had a conversation for 3 hours with a black guy, and we didn't come to blows.
Yeah, that guy was pretty nice. He was nice and thoughtful. And
exactly. But then here's what happens. He thinks, what he said about such and such, he was right, but he's black. But he was right, but he's black. So it's that cognitive dissonance thing going on, right? He knows what was said was true, but he can't rationalize it coming from a black person. So this goes on for a while. It may go on for months, maybe even a year, whatever. But he has to come to terms with, okay, so he's right, but he's black. Do I disregard the fact that he's black and accept the truth and change my direction? Or do I continue believing a lie? That's his dilemma, not mine. I've simply planted the seed and I've watered it.
Right.
So anyway, we're talking and stuff. And every time he would say, well, Mr. Davis, the Bible says blah, blah, blah. I'd reach down into my bag and retrieve my Bible and hand it to him. Or if my cassette tape ran out, I'd reach down, get a fresh tape, and change it. Every time I reached down, the bodyguard would reach up to his hip and put his hand on the butt of his gun. And, I understood that. I accepted that. I mean, that's his job. He has no clue what's in my bag, and his job is to protect his boss. So that's acceptable to me. And after a while, he realized, there was no threat in the bag, and he relaxed. I went in and out of the bag. Bodyguard didn't even move. So we're doing pretty good here. We're talking stuff. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a strange, very quick noise, very short noise happened. It went, shh. That was it. Just that noise. And we all jumped. And I even came up out of my seat and hit the table. And just in that split second, I knew that Mr. Kelly had made this bizarre noise. And I say bizarre because it was so short and so fast that my ear could not discern what it was. So therefore, I perceived it as an ominous, threatening noise. It came out of nowhere. I didn't know what it was. But what I did know was that he made it. How did I know that he made it? Because I didn't make it. So process of elimination. If I didn't do it, he had to have done it. Mm-hmm. And in that same split second, I'm hearing what that former Klansman told me. Daryl, don't fool with Roger Kelly. He will kill you. All right. So I had that in my mind. I didn't want to die that day. And so I feared for my life. And I went into survival mode. And in survival mode, which you go into when you fear for your life, you're only left with about 4 options that you can do. Some people, they will just faint. They'll just pass out.
I think that's what I would do, Daryl. I'm pretty sure I'd be in the fainting crowd. I think I would just
The fear is so great, the brain can't process it, and it shuts down, and you fall out and pass out. The second set, I don't do that. But the second thing people will do is their muscles begin constricting, and they tighten up, and they can't move. You've seen somebody get into a fight, and they ball up into a fetal position. They won't even deflect the blows. They just tighten up. It's because they can't move. It's called paralysis by fear. And I don't do that either. The third thing people will do is to run away. And that is the best option.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, I think that's what I would do. I think I'm pretty skinny. I got long legs. I think I could bolt pretty fast.
The best thing for you to do is to separate yourself from the source of fear as quickly as you can. And that is the option that I would have chosen had it been available to me. But there's no outrunning a bullet in a motel room. Right. I did not have a weapon. My secretary did not have a weapon. The only weapon I knew of for sure was the one I saw on the bodyguard's hip. I did not know if Mr. Kelly had a weapon up under his suit jacket or not. But all I knew was, I can't outrun a bullet. Right? Yeah. So the fourth option you have is to do a preemptive strike. Get them before they get you. And that's what I was going to do. That's why I came up out of my chair. I was going to dive across the table, grab the bodyguard, grab Mr. Kelly, slam them down to the ground, and disarm the bodyguard and neutralize, the situation. But when I came up and hit the table, I was looking right into Mr. Kelly's eyes. And I didn't say a word. He didn't say a word. But I could read his eyes. And he could read my eyes. My eyes were clearly saying to him, what did you just do? And his eyes were saying to me, what did you just do? And the bodyguard was like looking back and forth between both of us, like with his hand on his gun, like, what did either one of y'all just do? Well, Mary was sitting on top of the dresser to my left because there were no more chairs. And she realized what had happened. And she began explaining it when it happened again. The ice in the ice bucket next to her had begun melting, and the cans of soda were shifting down the ice. That was it.
And the tension of the room was so palpable that the sound of ice cubes brushing against each other could have everybody spook.
Exactly. And the cans just moving down the ice. It definitely had us spooked. And when she explained it and we heard it again, we all began laughing. All of us began laughing at how ignorant we had been. But this, I won't say this was a learning moment. That would come later. This was a teaching moment. And the lesson taught is this: all because some foreign, and foreign being the entity, foreign being the bucket of ice and cans of soda, was foreign to us because we were not it was not in our immediate conversation. All because some foreign entity had entered into our comfort zone, unaware, we were ignorant of it, via the noise that it made, we became fearful and accusatory of each other. And if you don't keep that fear in check, due to the ignorance breeds fear. If you don't keep that fear in check, that fear will escalate and breed hatred, because we hate the things that frighten us. We fear the things we don't understand, and then we hate the things that frighten us. If you don't keep that hatred in check, that hatred will escalate and breed destruction. So the lesson taught here is ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, in a normal situation, like say a company, a corporation, or a police department or something like that, people take their cues from the top. Whatever goes on at the top trickles down to the subordinates down below. So if police officers are screwing up, you got to fix the management. You got to tighten them up so they tighten up what's down below. They said you lead by example. Same thing, if you work at a company, and if the boss is goofing off and whatever else, don't expect your employees to not follow suit. All right, so that's called trickle down. If you want to fix racism, this is my theory. You can't use that trickle down thing. Forget about the destruction. Once something is destroyed, it's not coming back. George Floyd is not coming back. Forget about the next level down, the hatred. That's just a symptom. Forget about the fear, the next level down. That's another symptom. Go to the source. Ignorance. Ignorance is the source. If you cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear, because we fear what we don't know. When you cure ignorance, then you do know. So you cure ignorance, there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to destroy. Now, the good thing is this: ignorance can be cured. The cure for ignorance is education and exposure. So that is the lesson learned that would come later. And so after this incident, we all laughed and we carried on with our conversation. It kept making noise. I kept going in my bag. Nobody moved, nobody jumped. Everything was cool. And I would do some follow-ups with Mr. Kelly, many follow-ups. And each time I'd get together with him, I'd water that seed that I planted.
When you say that you did follow-ups with him, I mean, did you? What was the emotional state of the people in the room when you concluded that first meeting? You're probably there for a couple hours talking, like
about 3 hours. Yeah.
3 hours, and he granted he said odious things, but he came in a reasonably civil manner. Did he leave in the same manner? Was it like everything's done and you kept hounding him and what was the kickoff for the next phase of your interaction with him?
Well, he had a briefcase with him when he came in the room, and something told me, as I was winding up, something told me that his Klan robe and hood were in that briefcase. And I asked him, I said, "Do you have your robe and hood in there?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "Would you mind putting it on and letting me take a picture of you?" He said, "Okay." So he took off his suit jacket, put the briefcase on my bed, popped it open, pulled out this robe and hood, and he goes over to my dresser mirror, and he starts putting it on, and the bodyguard is fixing his hood and fixing his cape and all that. And I'm just sitting at the table watching this.
Yeah, this is so surreal. This is just so surreal to hear you describe this.
Yeah, but let me tell you, I've seen the Klan march, before this interview. I'd seen them march up and down the street and things like that. But I'd never sat in a room with a Klansman putting on his robe and hood. So when I saw them marching, they were already in their robe and hood, right? And so I got to tell you, Andrew, it's hard for me to explain the feelings because there were so many, a whole quantity of feelings. I felt sad for the guy. I felt bitter.
Sure.
I felt angry because of all the atrocities that had been committed against people who looked like me by people who wore robes and hoods just like he had on. And I tell you, I felt violent.
Sure.
I knew that I could jump up and just take him out, right? Bodyguard or no bodyguard. But I told myself, I said, Daryl, whoa. You got to hold on a second. Calm yourself down. Number one, you invited this man to this interview. He agreed. He came. He saw you at the door. When he came in and turned the corner, he saw you. He could have walked away, but he honored what he said he would do for you. And then you asked him to put on his robe and hood. He did it for you. So you should not ask somebody to do something for you, and then they do it, and then you go and beat them up for doing it. That's not right either. And then I reminded myself, you know what? That is just a piece of material. There are people, well, like I just told you before, they wear uniforms with a badge and a gun. They wear a suit and tie. They wear, a tennis shirt and tennis shorts. They wear a judge's robe. They wear a Hawaiian shirt and Bermuda shorts, who feel the exact same way as that man in the robe and hood standing in front of your dresser mirror. And he is the exact same man who was sitting 2 feet in front of you in his suit and tie. And so you didn't react this way when he was in his suit and tie. Why are you going to react this way in his robe and hood? He's the same person. So I had to remind myself of that, and that calmed me down. And so, we took some pictures together. He gave the bodyguard the camera. He took the pictures. And I thanked Mr. Kelly. I shook his hand. I shook the bodyguard's hand. And then he said to me, keep in touch, and gave me one of his Klan cards. Yeah. I'm thinking, what? Keep in touch. I didn't come here to make friends with the Klan.
You're not looking for a fourth bridge player.
Yeah. I came to find out how can you hate me, when you don't even know me. Yeah. But I was polite. I said, Mr. Kelly, I said, I have a lot of other Klan people to interview. I said, but I will get back in contact with you when the book is ready for publication and let you know. He said, okay, good luck, blah, blah, blah. And they left. And on the way home with Mary, I said to her in my car, I said, I rather like Roger Kelly. I don't like what he stands for, but I like him as a person. I said, we have more in common than we do in contrast. And I think I will keep in contact with him. All right. So she says, what do you mean you like him?
I was about to say, my immediate response would be, what? This isn't just like, he voted for Bush and you voted for Gore. I mean, this is a KKK member, and you still were like, you know what? He's got a good sense of humor. I would have a difficult time getting into that space of accommodation.
The ideology I abhorred.
Yeah, of course.
But we did have a lot of things in common, and she's like, what? He doesn't like you, and I said, yeah, I know, but I do like him. We have more in common than we do in contrast. And so I said, I think I will keep in contact with him. So I began calling him. If I had a gig up in his area, I'd call him and say, hey, man, I'm playing at such and such a place. Come on out. He would come. He'd bring his bodyguard.
And this is the head of the KKK in Maryland.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And he'd sit there, buy drinks, and watch me play. Get out there and dance on the dance floor with some woman from the bar or whatever. Like that. And then I would invite him down to my house. He'd come to my house. He'd bring his bodyguard. The bodyguard would sit on my couch next to him. And sometimes the bodyguard would get bored, take out his gun and twirl it on his finger like this.
Oh,
while
my
Mr.
God.
Kelly and I are talking. If I had to go somewhere up in his county, I would call him and say, hey, what are you doing? If he said nothing, I'd say, hey, come run this errand with me. I need to go drop off a music contract, with some bar, some club or whatever. Okay, I'll meet you at wherever. He never wanted me to come to his house. He always wanted to meet me at some place, usually this park and ride, And so I'd get there and he and the bodyguard would be there. And the bodyguard would get in my back seat Mr. Kelly get in my front seat, and we'd ride around, drop off a CD or drop off a contract or whatever.
And you're just casually hanging out with the head of the KK, the state Grand Wizard.
Yeah, and then, the state leader is a Grand Dragon. The national leader is the Imperial Wizard. Okay, so he was a Grand Dragon at the time. He would later become an Imperial Wizard.
Oh.
So anyway, we would get hungry, and we would stop to get something to eat. So now we're in a restaurant, sitting at the same table, taking mozzarella sticks out of the same basket, using the same salt and pepper shaker. Not my first time, not your first time, but his first time to ever do that with a black person. Of course, he's aware of blacks. He's aware of Jews. He has to work with some of them because he has to earn a paycheck. But that's, because they don't associate with somebody outside of their race. On the job, if they have to, that's what they have to do. But when they're off the clock, time to go home, they don't go to happy hour with those people. It's just a working relationship. And here he is socializing with me.
When you're running errands with a Grand Dragon and you're eating cheese sticks with a Grand Dragon, are you exclusively talking about race, or are you talking about sports or the weather? What's the communication?
All the above. The latest James Bond movie.
So you're just chilling.
Yeah. Just hanging out. Some things about the Klan, some things about this, that, or the other. So what do you think about Bill Clinton doing this? Oh well, I think this or I think that or whatever. Just just stuff in general. And now, again, like I said, that's not my first time hanging out with somebody outside of my race. It's his. All right. So he would come down to my house, and it got to the point where he was coming down to my house by himself. He trusted me that much that he didn't need to bring the bodyguard. And we would have dinner right here at this table where I'm sitting right now, or lunch. Now, this is somebody who felt when he first met me that I was inferior. And now he's in my inferior house, sitting at my inferior dining room table, eating my inferior food, So all of this has to be working on him. And then a couple years later, I still had not been to his house. But he got promoted from Grand Dragon, state leader, to Imperial Wizard, national leader.
He's gone from governor to president.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then he began inviting me to Klan rallies and invited me to his house. So I would go to his house. I would see his Klan den where he'd have his meetings. I'd take some pictures, from the book. I began going to these Klan rallies and, watch them give their speeches and light up this big cross on fire and parade around it and all this kind of stuff. And that was surreal.
Daryl, my jaw is I am afraid to mention I voted for Gary Johnson when I go to improv comedy. That's the level of cowardly passive aggressiveness that I inhabit of just don't bring it up. And the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's just going to be snide to me, and then I'll move on with my life. You're a black man literally going to a Klan rally.
As a comedian, as a musician, or somebody as a poet, or somebody else as an actor or a politician, anytime we walk on stage, we are subject to criticism. Anytime we put, whether somebody doesn't like the shirt we're wearing or the way we tie our shoes or whatever. Well,
and actually, to go real back, Daryl, you had mentioned that when this man first sat down across from you, he was saying these truly odious things, and they didn't viscerally evoke anger from you because you understood that it wasn't about you. And that's granted, I've not had to deal with your situation at all. However, one of the kind of developments I've had in my own life this last year is realizing that when I do meet, because I work in political media, so I do get people that throw mud at me, and just kind of realizing that when people are mean to me, it really is more of a statement about the relationship they have with themselves, or potentially a relationship they have with an uncle that's mean to them. And I'm getting that peripherally, but it's not about
transferring it to you.
Yeah, and I have to just not take it personally and realize that it's not about me.
Exactly. That's exactly what I did. So,
except that you were in danger. Again, I want to stress my situation is not the same as your situation.
And I'm not, what do you call it? Sadomasochist. I'm not one of those people. I'm not going to put myself in danger for my own thrill. That's not me.
You're going there kind of anthropologically of going to Klan rallies to see how they tick and understand why that ideology works, and because you're there out of curiosity
to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, to learn.
Okay.
And so my curiosity superseded any courage. So anyway, I would learn all this stuff, and over time, I'm just telling you about Roger Kelly, but there have been many more. There were those who would talk to me, those who would not talk to me, those who wanted to fight me, and I've been in a few fights. Fortunately, I won. I beat them in the street and I beat them in court. But those have been few and far between. I'm glad to say
it's not your preferred method of.
No, it's not my preferred method at all. But you got to understand, when you're dealing in that territory, some of that comes with the territory, so it can happen. And but I've had many better experiences than that. And so anyway, eventually Roger Kelly decided that cognitive dissonance thing was working, and he decided he'd had enough. He was done. And I ended up with his robe and hood. And this has happened many times. I don't like to say that I converted anybody, but I was the impetus for over 200 people to leave that ideology.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And it's wonderful and also just fascinating. I assume what's happening in Kelly's mind is this. How long is this between when you meet him and when he leaves the Klan?
About maybe 8 years, 7 years.
Okay, and you're chilling.
And some people take less time.
You're chilling with him. You're inviting him to gigs and stuff. And over the course of 8 years, at some point, there's some part in his brain that's like, wait a minute, I'm actually pretty good friends with Daryl. He's actually a really nice guy that I have I like him. He's a good person.
And here's the thing also that you got to do. You got to be aware of, because what's going to happen is this. They get to the point where, Daryl's okay for a black guy. He's okay. It's all those other
He's
black
one of the
people.
good ones, that mentality.
Yeah, exactly. So once I determine that I can trust somebody, then I'm comfortable inviting some of my Jewish friends, some of my other black friends, some of my white friends who don't share his ideals to meet him. And that way he can talk with other people like me or Jewish or, other people, that he doesn't like and talk with them. And that also works on him. So that way he's not thinking, oh, well, Daryl is exclusive. It's the other blacks, or other Jews that I don't like or whatever. So you got to make sure that you do that. Otherwise that will happen.
And so just after 8 years, does he just call you and go, I don't believe this anymore? Like, this is just, and I don't want to do it?
Well, in his case, he said, can we have dinner? And I said, yeah. And so I had nothing else to do that evening when he called. And I go up there. He goes, I got something to tell you. And I said, what's that? He goes, I'm done. And I was surprised. I knew we were becoming friends and stuff. And I saw him changing. But, you never quite know when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen. And I didn't think it was going to happen right then and there that day at dinner. But that's what that's why he wanted to tell me in person. And I ended up getting his robe and stuff. And, we'd hang out even after, he got done.
Well, I would assume it'd actually be slightly easier once he's no longer a Grand Dragon. He's just a guy.
He was the Imperial Wizard by then.
Oh, excuse me, yeah.
And the national leader. So, but in the meantime, in the interim, between all this, I was interviewing a lot of other Klansmen and Klanswomen, and a lot of them were quitting as we were becoming friends. Some took less time, some took more time, etc.
That makes sense, because if they're just hanging, not that I've ever been coming from that mindset. I've never been coming from that hate-filled thing. But I grew up in a fairly ethnically homogenous part of the country. I'm from Oklahoma originally. My class of 118 people had one black kid in it. So I didn't have an early diverse group of people that I was hanging out with. When I moved to Washington, D.C. in my 20s, I remember I was working at, did you ever go to B. Smith's? Because you live kind of around there, don't you? You know B. Smith's over at Union Station?
Sure, Union Station.
Yeah. And so I was a bartender there briefly. I was horrible at it, incidentally. My boss called me Earthquake. It's the only job that I ever 100% should have been fired from. I'm amazed I wasn't, and I wouldn't have. But anyway, I did that. And it was predominantly a black bar. Most of the people, or most of the clientele that came in was black. And I wasn't. Again, there wasn't any animosity that I had in my heart towards anybody, but there was a certain lack of awareness or maybe unfamiliarity that I had. And I remember, people would come in and I just kind of talked to them. And I talked to this lady that was saying, my mother is getting older and we're thinking about putting her in a home. we don't want to do it, but we can't really take care of her. And it was the exact conversation we've been having in my family about our grandmother. I mean, it was just beat for beat the same thing. And it was just this kind of sense of like, oh, there's no difference here at all. Like, I don't need to feel uncomfortable. This is the exact same group of people I grew up with, just in a different geographic environment and a different set of circumstances. But when you do meet people, and you get to know them as human beings, it's very difficult to maintain any type of animosity or discomfort. And
there was your common ground right there. You know, you're going through that with your folks. She's going through it with her folks. And you know what? You know what really bothers me a great deal? You know, I live here in the D.C. area, and I'm a full-time musician. So, you know, besides playing festivals and nightclubs and things like that, you know, sometimes I play weddings and all that kind of thing. It bothers me tremendously when I play a wedding in the D.C. area. And let's say a white couple is getting married or a black couple is getting married. And we do the wedding, and everybody there is predominantly white, or everybody there is predominantly black. I'm thinking, what is going on here? You know, if I played a wedding maybe in Harlem, that might be, you know, predominantly black, something like that. Or if I played a wedding in Bangor, Maine, or someplace, or you know, Sandpoint, Idaho, or something, it'd be predominantly white. Mm-hmm. But in D.C. is a cosmopolitan city.
Very much so.
How can you live in the D.C. area if you're a white couple getting married and not have any black friends? Something's wrong. And don't tell me I'm not racist. You know, you just don't want to invite them to your wedding. So, you know, that's like people call themselves Christian. And I'm a Christian. So if I go to a white, you know, because, you know, there are black Baptist churches and white Baptist churches. Well, why does a black Baptist church exist? Well, because we could not get into the white churches back in the day, right? So now we can. But if I go to a white Baptist church and say, hey, you know, we read the same Bible, we worship the same God, you know, we believe in Jesus Christ, you know, can I be your brother in Christ? Mm-hmm. They say, yeah, absolutely, and hug me and stuff. And then I say, well, can I be your brother-in-law if your sister wants to marry me? That's when they have a hard time.
Well, I hope that they get over that. I hope that it would seem to be progress in the sense that we can acknowledge that our ethnic demographics are just attributes that we hold and not intrinsic qualities that separate us, that the intrinsic things we all have in common, which is humanity. And I hope we get to that point. I want to back up a little bit. When you're hanging out with Kelly for 8 years, would you have called him your friend during that time?
Yes, I did. Really? I absolutely did.
So, okay, yeah. I asked this because I feel like right now everybody kind of feels like they're walking on eggshells, and I feel like so much of conversation when it comes to race or politics is about how do I quickly dismiss you based on some infraction you've committed? How do I quickly make you not someone I have to deal with? And you're doing the exact opposite of that. I mean, you are actively friends with someone with truly odious beliefs, but it's not. You're not telling me that you had him on like probation, where he's like he might become a friend, but you're actively friends with him while he holds these horrible ideas.
Absolutely, because I know it's right. I know it's wrong. I'm practicing true Christianity.
Love thy enemy. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, and like today, we're seeing another page turning. You know, and a lot of people are looking at these protests, and they think the thing with George Floyd is an anomaly, a one-off, and it's not. But a lot of people are recognizing, oh my goodness, this is what those people have been talking about all these decades, and now I recognize it, and they're beginning to feel that empathy. So that's why today, we've always had white people who have joined us in our protests, dating back to 1955 with Rosa Parks and the bus boycott, and on through the 60s with Dr. King, even through the time of his death. But never before have we seen this many white people joining in with those marches. And that is also causing the page to turn a lot quicker, because they're seeing it. Before, when it was predominantly black people, the powers that be were like this.
Right.
They didn't want to hear what we had to say, and they shut us down. And now we have a lot of people who look like the people that need to hear it, and they're seeing people who look like them marching with us, and so they're pulling the earplugs out, and they're beginning to listen. Never before have we seen so many cops get arrested and charged and fired that quickly. And also another thing that's happening is the ripple effect. We have not seen a ripple effect like that ever, to my knowledge, that great, because these protests and marches started predominantly focused on police. And the ripple effect has been, abandoning the Confederate flag from NASCAR, taking down the statues, changing Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben's. All these are ripple effects that had nothing to do with the cops. And that's a good thing, that collective voice of blacks and whites working together.
When you're befriending these people that are in the KKK, and I follow your work outside of our interview. I know that you've also made friends with some neo-Nazis, and you've turned neo-Nazis as well. Tell me can you tell me how you understand racism? Is it a binary state where I'm either racist or I'm not racist? Is it a spectrum? Is it little bits and pieces that you may or may not have? Like, kind of, how do you conceive of racism?
To me, I think it's a spectrum. It's an idea, and people move along the spectrum depending upon how other people affect them. People tend to tribalize. I wouldn't say either you are racist or you're not racist. No, there are definitely degrees of it. I see it as something, it's a learned behavior, regardless of how far along the spectrum you are or how less. But if it's a learned behavior, it can be unlearned.
Yeah.
And that's what I focus on.
And
you have people who are fine. My best friend is black, but I don't want him marrying my sister. So I'm not a racist. I'm not going to wear a robe and hood, but I don't believe in interracial marriage. So you got those kind of races. Black people and Jewish people are fine, but they should have their own neighborhoods and their own workplaces and their own schools. We don't have to mix, but we should respect one another. Those are separatist type races, as opposed to supremacist ones who everybody who's not white needs to get out of here and go back to where they came from.
And then to draw a corollary, I mean, we've got an election coming up. It's going to be contentious. My guess is that you have friends that vote differently than you do, that you're okay with. That is not. Yeah. You don't tend to take that as grounds in relationships.
Here's what I say. Not everybody who votes for Donald Trump is a racist, but every racist votes for Donald Trump.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think that's true. But at the same time, though, it sounds like you would I watched a bunch of relationships implode after the last election, where people that had been friends for years just quit being friends with each other. And while I've got several friends that voted for Donald Trump. I disagree with I'll say my friends that voted for him did not vote for him out of an overt desire to be racist or anything like that. Right. I disagree with their reasons for voting, but we're still friends. I still think that they're very nice people.
Sure.
And I hope that they don't vote for him, but it doesn't change how I feel about them. But
now hold that point there. So you're not a racist, and you have friends who vote for a candidate that all the racists support. So somebody might look at you and say, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with Andrew Heaton? You're friends with somebody who votes for somebody that every racist supports. And they have their own reasons, and they're nice people. Well, this is what I'm telling you. With these relationships that I'm having with people in the KKK or the neo-Nazis or just individual supremacists or alt-right or whatever, I do not agree with their ideology. And outside of that ideology, some of them are actually nice people. They take care of their families, they're honest, they're decent people, other than that twisted ideology. And that's what I try to lead by example, and that's what changes that ideology and brings them over to my side. And perhaps sometime, the people who are your good friends who vote for Donald Trump, they might at some point realize hey, you know what? I need to change that direction if Donald Trump doesn't change his.
Well, and I mean, I find in general, like one of the other big things I've learned the last couple of years is just that people do not respond to contempt well. It's just contempt is never productive. There's a wide variety of political opinions of people that listen to this program. So a lot of people disagree with me on a regular basis, which is fine. I think it's really cool that people like being intellectually challenged and they like coming on and hearing, like, that's a wonderful attribute. And what I found is no one ever really gets mad at me as long as I am respectful of them and I treat them with dignity and I treat their ideas with some level of respect. If I come in and I'm just openly contemptful of other opinions, people are going to react poorly to that. But I have been very surprised at how receptive people are when you just approach them in a kind way.
We don't have to respect what somebody says, but we should respect their right to say it. And, there's a saying, hurt people hurt people. The first hurt is a adjective, and the second hurt is a verb. Hurt people hurt people.
Right, yeah.
And so that explains how if you come on with contempt, you're going to get it back.
Yeah. Well, and I'll add to that. I don't think the contempt's good for you either, even if it's deserved. Like in your case, Daryl, I don't think anybody would have faulted you if you had hated Mr. Kelly. I think that no one would look at that and go, well, he's being very irrational to dislike this KKK Grand Dragon who thinks he's a criminal. But at the same time, I think if you'd really held on to that contempt and let it stay in you, that it wouldn't have been good for you. It would have made you sadder and more angry and things like that. So just for our own benefit, I think right now there's so much discourse going on built around dehumanizing people, of trying to reduce them to some kind of evil cartoon character. And I just, even when I really disagree with the ideology or the policy or the opinion of people, I can't really see situations where dehumanizing anyone ever works well.
Well, people say, there's a saying, punch a Nazi. Well, I'll tell you what, I know a lot of Nazis, and I'll guarantee you, you're not going to change their ideology by punching them in the face. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
If anything, you're going to reinforce it.
Are there any specific things that you think would be of benefit that we could employ, say, on a policy level? And beyond that, just any advice you have for people listening to the program who either, one, would like to help mend race relations, or two, feel defensive because they're conservative and they're called racist or something like that?
Yeah, we need to get rid of political correctness. We need to be transparent, put all our cards on the table face up. Let's stop walking on eggshells. And because how are people going to learn how we truly feel and then be able to have those things addressed? White people need to know how blacks truly feel. Black people need to know how whites truly feel. Some of it's based in fear. Some of it's based on misperception, not fear, but just misperception, ignorance, whatever, on all our sides. But we have to get to know one another. So let's put political correctness aside and agree to have, down-to-earth conversations. We are in the 21st century, and we are living in space-age times, but yet we're still thinking with Stone Age minds. So we've got to change that. That's number one. We need more community and police coming together and having civil discourse. We need more people listening to our pleas. We don't want to be treated special. We want to be treated equal. And I'm so grateful for the many people that are seeing that now and are joining in with these marches. That's what unity is about. And I understand, people are getting upset about their statues coming down and all that kind of stuff and their Confederate flags. Taking those statues down and those Confederate flags down does not change anybody's ideology or their racism, right? But they should not stay up. I don't feel that those statues and flags should be destroyed. They are part of our history, good, bad, ugly, or shameful. They should be put in a museum or put in some Confederate memorial park where people can go and see them and lay flowers down by them or do whatever they want to do with them. But they have no business being erected all over the city or Confederate flags flying on our state capitol building. things like that.
And I'll add to that, where you're at in Maryland, like I'll put it this way, I have much less of a problem with a Confederate statue erected in 1880 by like, actual people that like, but like in Maryland where you are, the majority of the Confederate statues are from like 1970. They're not, they weren't erected by anybody. They weren't erected as war memorials to the fallen dead. They were very much erected by people that wanted black people to know that they were secondary citizens and this was a place run by white folk. And like, I don't have any problem taking those statues down.
Well, they all should come down, even the ones erected right after 1865 at the end of the Civil War.
I'd put them in a memorial place or a museum, like you said.
Exactly. Because you know what? The loser does not get to build his or her statues or fly his or her flag. All right? This country went to war against Great Britain. It was called the Revolutionary War. Great Britain lost. That's why we don't have statues of British
King
generals
George
around
III,
here. King George III and flying the Union Jack and all that kind of stuff. All right. This country went to war against Japan when they bombed Pearl Harbor. We don't have their Japanese heroes from that war. The statues of them built around here were flying the Japanese flag. This country went to war against Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. We have plenty of German Americans here in this country, but they don't honor their Third Reich ancestors by building statues of Hitler or Goebbels or whoever else, Joseph Mengele and all these other people, and flying Nazi flags.
Well, and in the same way, I mean, Germany has all sorts of really cool history that they're able to revel in, and I think the South is the same way. There's really cool stuff in the South to be proud of.
And here's what people say: no, this flag is not hate; it's heritage. Let me tell you something. I'm a descendant of slaves. My parents are from Virginia, all right? And slaves in the South had to fight for their slave masters in the Confederacy. So my ancestors fought in the Confederacy. Now, the war was fought over slavery. And while I honor my ancestors because without them I wouldn't be here, I don't honor slavery by any means or the Confederacy. But I had ancestors who fought in the Confederacy. Now, if you really believe that flag is heritage and not hate, right? Like you said, there are plenty of good things that came out of the South. You can find something other than slavery to celebrate. And that flag was the battle flag that stood for slavery. Now, if you really want to fly your flag and you think it's all heritage and not hate, then I want you to go to a Ku Klux Klan rally with me. And anytime you go to one, you're going to see all these Confederate flags, especially down south. You tell those people to give you back your flag because that's not what it stands for. If you do that, I will come over to your house, I will take your Confederate flag, and I will hoist it up your flagpole for you. Whether they give it back to you or not, if you go there and you tell them to give you back your flag, because it does not stand for what they stand for.
Yeah. Well, and like just to put a cap on it, I mean,
and if you don't do it, then you are acknowledging it also stands for hate.
Yeah, you're tacitly saying it's multiple things, including this odious thing I don't want to talk about. Well, I'll just to put a cap on it. Like the other thing is that the Confederacy lasted 5 years. How long? 4 years. We're talking about 4 years of Southern history. 4 years. It's not like it was a 300-year kingdom that got conquered by the invading Spanish. Like this is a 4-year odious aberration, and there's all these other things that there's wonderful writers and musicians and inventors, Dolly Parton, all these great things that you could somebody's proposed, Daryl, of removing Confederate statues and just putting up Dolly Parton statues in its place.
Hey, that worked for me. I met Dolly Parton.
Oh, did you?
I met her. She's a very, very, very nice, nice lady. She is genuine. She is genuine. She's a truly caring individual. Absolutely.
Wonderful.
And the Civil War officially ended in 1865, but it didn't really end. We're still fighting it today with all these reenactments. And all it did was it mutated. It mutated from what it was, slavery. It mutated into what? Segregation. Okay, so fine, we got to unchain you, and free you, but you can't come and eat in our restaurants. If you want some, you got to go around to the back door and get it. You can't drink from this water fountain. You got to drink from that water fountain. You can't use this restroom. You got to use the colored restroom.
Theoretical access to democratic elections with really heavy-handed voter suppression.
Say it again?
I said theoretical access to democratic elections with extremely difficult voter suppression going on at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. So it just mutated from slavery to segregation. And then from segregation, we were desegregated, integrated. That's when those statues went up, of course. All right. And so that's another mutation. So what did they do then? They couldn't put up signs saying, I can't come in. The racism became systemic and institutionalized. That's just another mutation. So the Civil War is still going on, my friend.
Yeah, I had a really fascinating conversation with one of my friends here about a month ago who was telling me that if you go back and you look at, as best as we can figure out the mindset of poor white people in Kentucky and Tennessee around like 1830, they actually had a lot of commonality with slaves and with the oppressed, because it like a lot of them were, I'm really poor. There's this rich guy that lives in a house over there. I've got more in common with this other poor black person than I do with the rich guy in the house. And then over the course of 50, 60 years, the plantation owners went, no, you're a white man. You should feel proud of the house. Like the system we have, your ego should be coming from your ethnicity and being a part of this race, and sort of co-opted that and bringing it over. And then when I started thinking about it, I was like, oh, well, then that won. I mean, that was a predominant mindset following the Civil War for a very, very long time. Of, I am not an individual who happens to be white. I am a white man, and that
right.
that collectiveness. Well,
absolutely,
Daryl, I'll let you go here in a moment. First of all, what is the title of your book? Because you've referenced it several times. I'm sure people listening would love to buy it.
Okay, it's going to go back into print very soon. It's called Clandestine, spelled with a K, Clandestine Relationships. And I'm working on my second book right now. The first book is out of print, but I took it out of print. But I will put it back out probably before the end of the year, and as well as a second book. And there's also a documentary that was made about my work called Accidental Courtesy. And you can find it on Amazon Prime and iTunes and Netflix and all that kind of stuff.
Well, please let me know when your second book comes out, because the people who listen to this program are readers, and they get a lot of their reading recommendations from it. And while this hasn't dropped yet, I'm fairly confident you're going to be a hit. I think people are going to really like you. So I would love for an excuse for you to come back on the show. And if that excuse is promoting your book, great. Finally, I would love to. Thank you. My suspicion, just as another creative person, is I really thought I was just going to be doing stand-up comedy. I hadn't anticipated doing a podcast. My guess is that you, as a musician, had not thought you were going to become a very genuinely heroic race reconciliator. So for people that just are interested in you as a musician, where can they find you? Where do you perform at? Do you have any albums they could purchase? How do they get into that side of you?
Sure. I played piano for Chuck Berry, the man who invented rock and roll, on and off for 32 years. Wow. He was my hero, my idol, my mentor, my
Chuck
friend.
Berry, wow.
My boss. Oh, yeah. And a lot of the 50s people, a lot of blues people. And, I have several CDs out that you can find on iTunes or Amazon or CD Baby or, wherever. And you can go to my website, daryldavis.com, DARYL, only one R, daryldavis.com. They can check out my schedule. They can see where I'm lecturing, see where I'm performing, and come out and see me. Not doing anything right now on lockdown, but soon the schedule will be updated. Yeah,
I'm not doing a whole lot of comedy gigs at the moment myself. It's mostly podcasting. Well, Daryl, it was a pleasure and an honor to meet you. I think you are a tremendous person.
My pleasure.
And I am so pleased that you exist and you're doing what you do. I wish that there were more people that have such moral fortitude and strong character and love as guiding forces in their life. I think if there were more people like you, the country would be in a much better shape, and I'm glad you're around.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
That was amazing. Daryl is absolutely invited to my future wedding. If it ever happens. Between lockdown and my snowballing eccentricity, it might not. But if it does, Daryl is absolutely invited to hang out at my wedding. Until then, I'm going to see if I can't somehow get Daryl to perform at my birthday. All of which is underwritten by the good people who fund this whole endeavor via Patreon, which you can do by going to patreon.com/Andrew Heaton. All right, look, gang. I would love to fund this whole operation by selling erectile dysfunction medication. That remains the entire point of the program. Get a big enough audience that I can cash out selling erectile dysfunction medication to the masses. There's just one problem. You guys and gals are alternately too virile and or attractive to have any use for the stuff, and the advertisers know it. I've sat down with these slick Madison Avenue boner pill executives and told them I'd hawk their snake oil tablets for money. But they looked at the demographic info for people who listen to this program, and they got so mad they tossed me out a fire escape, hat and everything. So that means, I guess we gotta fund it through Patreon, friends and neighbors. Think of it like you're buying me a beer or a cup of coffee for my troubles. Last week, some of you got confused and tried to mail me an actual cup of coffee, but it sloshed everywhere, and when I opened up the package, there was just some brown sludge and a lot of broken ceramics. Please don't do that again. Don't do that. If you want to buy me a cup of coffee, go to patreon.com/Andrew Heaton to support the show and to receive a weekly bonus episode. This episode in particular is underwritten by Pedios, the peat-flavored cereal. I sure do enjoy a fat glass of scotch, particularly from Isla. Peaty scotch doesn't just taste delicious, it's very pleasant to smell. And I like everyone in the bar to know that I'm drinking something more expensive and masculine than they are. It's like drawing a line in the sand inside someone else's nostrils. That's probably why, for over 100 years, Peaty Isla whiskey has been the favored drink for murderously glaring at someone from across the room while sitting next to a fireplace. Of course, you still have to wait until 5 o'clock most days if you want to sup that smoky ichor. Until now. Introducing Pedios, the peat-flavored breakfast cereal from Glen Kevin. Pedios taste like any delicious high-fiber breakfast cereal, only smokier. But they smell like you doused a campfire with milk. Everyone in the house will take one whiff and know you're drinking peat-flavored cereal, and that means they should fear you. What better way to begin your morning than with a spoonful of hearty chow, eaten while your eyes narrow to slits as you stare into the middle distance, plotting the destruction of all who oppose you. Start your morning by telling the universe at large that you're in no mood for its shenanigans, and it'd best leave you the hell alone. Also, it has 18 grams of flaxseed, which are high in omega-3 fatty acids. Pedios, the peat-flavored cereal from Glen Kevin. That's the show. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Daryl Davis, for coming on. You are an amazing human being and a fun guest, and it was an honor speaking with you. Also, one hell of a good piano player, too. The kick and boogie you hear right now in place of our regular outro music is none other than the extremely talented Daryl Davis on piano. Thank you, Kevin MacLeod, who supplied this week's Pedios commercial music, Fiddles McGinty. They really are delicious, even if they make your eyes water. Also, the Patreon Plugs theme, Shades of Spring. And thank you, media assistant Eric Stipe. Until next time, I've been Andrew Heaton, and so have you.